I drove through the winding, snowy roads of Aspen, Colorado, windshield wipers swishing in rhythm with the heavy flurries falling outside. The mountains loomed like silent guardians, white and stoic against the fading light. It was supposed to be magical, our first Christmas back at the Price family estate since the pandemic. I had gifts in the back seat, a cooler full of food, and a playlist of holiday jazz humming low from the speakers. Landon promised me this year would be different. Just us, peace, snow, real family time, he'd said. But when I pulled into the long driveway, the house was dark. No wreath on the front door. No smell of pine or cookies wafting through the windows. Just silence. A silence so absolute it made my skin prickle. I parked and stepped out into the snow, the cold biting through my gloves. Dragging my suitcase behind me and balancing the food bag in my arms. I rang the bell. No answer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the warmth I expected was nowhere to be found. The heat was on low, the air slightly chilled. No Christmas lights. No fire in the hearth. No signs of Landon or his mother, Vivian, who always hosted with unbearable flair. Instead, there was only the ticking of a grandfather clock and, "About time." A gravelly voice called from the living room. I froze. There, seated in a worn leather chair by the cold fireplace, was a man I hadn't seen in over a year, Calvin Price, Landon's estranged father. His cane rested against the chair, and though his hands looked frail, his eyes, sharp, pale gray, tracked my every movement with unnerving clarity. Where's Landon?" I stammered. Calvin jerked his chin toward the mantel. A single piece of paper was propped beside a decorative elk statue. Still gripping the bags, I crossed the room and picked up the note. It was written in Landon's handwriting. Fiji was a last-minute thing. Went with Mom and Yara. She really needed a break. You'll stay here and help Dad. He needs you. Back January 3rd. My fingers trembled. Yara? His assistant? And Vivian too? I blinked at the note again, hoping I'd misread it. But the words were still there, cold and unapologetic. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice catching. "He said he wanted a quiet holiday. Just the two of us. I brought everything. We were going to decorate the tree. Make his grandmother's cider." Calvin let out a low chuckle. "They left Tuesday. Didn't even bother to clean up. That should tell you everything." I turned to face him fully. "They left you here? Alone?" "While they flew to Fiji I swallowed, with Yara. They figured I'd die quietly," Calvin replied, his voice bitter but composed. "Or at least be too sick to cause trouble. But then you showed up." The bag slipped from my arms to the hardwood floor. My vision blurred. "They left. Both of us." "Classic Price move," he muttered, reaching for a throw blanket to cover his legs. "When things get hard, disappear." I slowly lowered myself into the armchair across from him, still clutching the note like it might turn to ash. My heart pounded, not just from hurt, but from something else, a growing suspicion. I opened my phone and checked Landon's messages. The last text he'd sent, just 2 days ago, said, "Can't wait to see you. Drive safe. Save me a slice of your bourbon pecan pie." I checked Instagram next, and there it was. A photo, posted 5 hours ago by Yara. She and Landon on a sun-drenched beach, her tanned legs draped over his, a tropical drink in each of their hands. The caption: "Island time with the best company, palm tree heart, #no stress, #new chapter." I didn't realize I was shaking until I heard the soft clink of Calvin placing a mug of lukewarm coffee on the side table near me. "You didn't know," he said, not as a question, but a fact. My voice came out hollow. "He drained our joint savings. We were supposed to put a down payment on a home in Boulder next month. That's why I kept saying no to new gear for my studio." I trusted him. Calvin's eyes narrowed. "You got abandoned, same as me. But maybe, just maybe, we can turn that around." I looked up. tears stinging the corners of my eyes. "What are you saying?" He didn't answer right away. He just sat back, folded his hands, and said evenly, "Shall we begin?" I stared at Calvin, still hearing the echo of his words. Shall we begin? I wasn't ready to begin anything. I hadn't even begun to process what just happened. But Calvin was already wheeling himself toward the kitchen with surprising coordination. "Tea?" he asked without waiting for a reply. I followed on autopilot, passing family portraits I hadn't noticed before, Landon as a teen, arms crossed and expression smug, Vivian with a stiff smile, and Calvin in the background, always slightly off-center. Slightly out of place. The kitchen was dim, half-stocked, and cold. A few spoiled vegetables lay forgotten on the counter beside an unopened box of protein bars. "Why did they leave you like this?" I asked, my voice tight. Calvin didn't answer immediately. He opened a cabinet, retrieved 2 mismatched mugs, and filled them from a half-full kettle. "Because they think I'm dying," he said matter-of-factly. Which, to be fair, I am. I flinched. "What do you mean?" He handed me a mug. ALS. Diagnosed last fall. "I've got about 6 months, give or take, before everything shuts down. Maybe less. Motor function's already going. Hands mostly, but mine's still sharp." He tapped his temple with a weak smile. "Too sharp for their liking." I sank into a kitchen chair, the note from Landon still crumpled in my pocket like a thorn. "They didn't even tell me." "Of course not," Calvin said, lowering himself into a seat across from me. "They needed someone to babysit the dying man. So they picked you. Probably figured you were too loyal, or too naive, to refuse." I looked away, jaw tight. "Yara, his assistant. How long has that been going on?" Calvin exhaled through his nose. 3, maybe 4 months. "She's been here before, you know." Dropped him off in that red Tesla with the smug license plate. His lip curled. "She always wore heels too high for snow." That told me everything I needed to know. I reached for my phone and opened our bank app. My stomach dropped. 3 days ago, $18,400 withdrawal from our joint savings. He'd wiped us out. That was supposed to be our future, I whispered. The money we'd been saving. We agreed, after New Year's, we'd start looking for a place near Boulder. I put my business on hold. I turned down a photo job in Alaska last month because he asked me to stay close. Calvin nodded slowly. Landon has always been good at asking. Even better at vanishing. I blinked back angry tears. "How are you so calm about all this?" His gaze met mine, steady but heavy. "Because I've had time to sit in the silence and learn from it. I stopped expecting decency from them a long time ago. But now there's a chance to make this count." He reached to his side and pulled open a drawer in the kitchen island, withdrawing a small leather-bound notebook, worn and bulging with notes and receipts. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "Documentation. I've been keeping a record of everything. Missed medical appointments. Unfilled prescriptions. Heating turned down to 60 while I was recovering from a respiratory infection. Times they didn't answer my calls. Transfers from my account that were never explained." He pushed it toward me. "They think I'm senile. Or close enough not to matter. But I've been watching." I flipped through the pages, detailed dates, scribbled conversations, screenshots of account logins. Even timestamps of phone calls never returned. The evidence was staggering. Meticulous. Painful. "You're building a case." I was, he corrected. But I didn't know what I'd do with it. "Now, I have you." I met his eyes. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you were betrayed too. Because you're the one they underestimated. And because you've still got fire left in you, I can see it." I shook my head slowly. "I'm just overwhelmed. I don't even know where to begin." He took a sip of tea. "Then I'll show you." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. Then Calvin stood with effort and motioned me toward the study. "You need to see the rest," he said. As I followed him through the hall, past the silent Christmas tree with only half the lights working, I felt a shift inside me, small, but undeniable. I wasn't just a guest abandoned at the holidays. I was part of something deeper now. And whatever came next, I wasn't walking away. The study looked untouched, like a room preserved from another life. The scent of old paper and faded wood hung in the air. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with law journals, classic novels, and dusty photo albums. A fireplace sat cold beneath a framed portrait of a much younger Calvin beside a woman I assumed was Landon's late stepmother. "Sit there," Calvin said, gesturing to the armchair in front of his heavy oak desk. "This will take a moment." He shuffled to the bookshelf behind the desk and ran a trembling hand along the spines, counting under his breath. Then he tugged at a thick, leather-bound volume labeled Federal Torts and Elder Rights. A quiet click echoed from somewhere behind the wall. He turned, gave me a thin smile. "Old lawyer trick." The center shelf slid back slightly, revealing a narrow steel safe embedded into the wall. "You have a hidden safe?" I blinked. "You really were a lawyer." Calvin chuckled without warmth. "And a good one, once. That's why they need me dead, but not too soon. Long enough to keep their hands clean, not long enough to let me finish what I've started." He entered the code slowly, each number a careful press. With a low hiss, the safe door creaked open. Inside were several thick folders, a hard drive, a velvet pouch, and an airtight document case. He handed them to me one by one, each heavier than the last. "What is all this?" I asked, placing them carefully on the desk. "My real accounts. Assets Vivian and Landon don't know exist. Property. Offshore investments. Holdings I built before they ever slithered into my life." He pointed to the document case. "And my real will." I stared at it. "You mean, there's another one?" He nodded. "They think I made a will last year, leaving everything to Landon. That one's just a decoy. This," he tapped the case, "is the one that will hold up in court. Ironclad. And it names you." "Me?" I asked, stunned. "Why would you leave anything to me?" He looked at me with the kind of clarity that felt like an X-ray. "Because you showed up. Because you stayed. Because in less than a day, you've offered me more dignity than my own family has in a decade. I won't let them win, Rachel. But I can't do this alone." I swallowed hard, my fingers brushing the edge of the case. "You're asking me to help you take them down." "I'm asking you," he said softly, "to help me do what's right. This isn't revenge. It's restitution. It's making sure people like Landon and Vivian don't keep getting away with treating others like stepping stones." I nodded slowly. "Then show me what you've got." He opened the hard drive case and plugged it into a small laptop. "Video footage. I started installing cameras last spring. They never noticed, too busy posing for their own reflections." We clicked through folders labeled by date. Some showed Vivian canceling home care appointments on speakerphone. Others showed Landon rifling through Calvin's medicine cabinet, pocketing painkillers, or laughing with Yara on FaceTime while Calvin coughed in the background. And then there were the documents, PDFs of forged care invoices, bank statements showing suspicious maintenance fees charged to Calvin's accounts, legal letters from Calvin's financial advisor expressing concern over sudden withdrawals. "This is damning," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but it's not enough unless it's organized, archived, and presented right. That's where you come in." He leaned back, visibly winded but determined. "Vivian's going to contest the will the moment she realizes she's been cut out. Landon will lie through his teeth. But if we build the narrative now, timeline, documentation, witness statements, by the time they're back from Fiji, the story will already be written." I exhaled slowly. "You really thought this through." "I've had a lot of quiet nights." There was a long pause between us as I stared at the files, the silent proof of a family's rot. I thought of my own life, 5 years married to a man who spoke like a partner but operated like a puppeteer. The slow isolation. The manipulation. The financial control disguised as us planning for the future. I gave him everything, I murmured. My trust, my time, my savings, and he sold it all for a vacation with his assistant. Calvin looked at me, his voice firm but kind. Then let's take it back. Not just the money, the truth. The part of yourself they tried to bury. I met his gaze, steady now. The snow outside continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. All right, I said. Let's begin. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Calvin moving through the kitchen, slow but deliberate. The man may have been dying, but he carried himself like someone on a mission. After breakfast, he laid out the plan with the precision of a courtroom strategist. If we're going to corner them, he said, tapping a yellow legal pad, we need more than facts. We need optics, emotion, evidence they can't spin. The kind that makes even a cold-hearted judge pause. I nodded, flipping through a sketchbook I used for photography projects. You're talking about staging. I'm talking about truth, he corrected, wrapped in theater. And so we began. First, we needed props. I called an old college friend who now worked for a private hospice network. I told her, carefully, that I was helping a terminal patient whose family had abandoned him. That we needed visual aids for documentation. No lies. Just omissions. She hesitated. Then agreed to loan us a few things off the books. By afternoon, a discreet white van arrived. Inside, a portable oxygen tank, a collapsible 4-stand, heart monitor leads, and a bag of unused medication vials with realistic labels. You're serious about this, she whispered, glancing at Calvin, who gave her a polite nod from the window. You trust her? She asked him. With my legacy, he said simply. That night, we transformed his bedroom. The 4-stand was placed by the bed, tubes carefully taped to Calvin's forearm, but disconnected from any fluids. The oxygen tank sat beside the dresser, its hose tucked near his mouth during photos. A box of pill bottles was arranged neatly on the nightstand, most of them filled with colored vitamins to avoid real risk. Lighting matters, Calvin coached, watching me prepare the room. Use shadows. Under eye. Top down if you want to show hollowness. Trust me, juries believe what looks sad. I laughed. You were definitely a lawyer. You have no idea, he muttered. I used my Canon DSLR and phone camera both, high resolution for legal use, low quality for text messages that might accidentally leak. In some photos, I was sitting at his bedside looking exhausted, hair disheveled, makeup faded, eyes puffy from fake tears. In others, Calvin lay back, eyes half closed, skin powdered slightly to appear more pallid. This feels dark, I said after one particularly convincing shot. Calvin opened one eye. What they did was darker. Point taken. We staged about 30 photos across 2 days. Then we filmed a short video where Calvin struggled to sit up, reaching for water with a shaky hand, me rushing in to help. It looked raw, real, intimate. When the setup was complete, we turned to the bait. Phase 1. The message. I crafted a text to Landon's sister, Claire, the only member of the family with even a hint of decency. Using Calvin's phone, I sent. Rough night. Oxygen levels dropped. Rachel's managing. We'll keep you updated. Attached was a photo of Calvin asleep in bed, hooked up to the oxygen line, color drained from his face. Within 5 minutes, Claire replied. Oh no. Poor Dad. Is he stable now? Do you think, should we come home early? Calvin read the message and smiled faintly. Hooks in. Now let's reel. Phase 2. The voicemail. This was harder. I dialed Landon's number, knowing full well he wouldn't pick up, but I needed the voicemail recording. My voice needed to crack in just the right places. Hi. It's me. Look. I know you're probably busy, but your father's condition is declining fast. He was lucid this morning, but now he's not making much sense. The hospice nurse said we should prepare for the worst. I paused, let out a shaky breath, and added the dagger. I really thought you'd be here. Then I hung up. Calvin was recording the whole thing on his end, preserving every sound for our records. Academy Award, he said, raising an eyebrow. Years of freelancing for emotional weddings, I replied, still shaking a little. It teaches you how to cry on cue. We spent the rest of the day filling out a health log, backdating several entries to show weeks of declining health, fluctuating vitals, missed care, changes in medication, and subtle signs of cognitive decline. Each entry had matching visuals, photos or screenshots, and brief narratives. This isn't just for them, Calvin said, pointing to the logbook. This is for the courts. For any investigator. You can't argue with a paper trail. And if they challenge it? I asked. They'll lose, he said without blinking. By evening, we sat side by side on the living room couch, exhausted but buzzing with momentum. This isn't revenge, I said aloud, surprising myself. This feels like justice. Like balance. He smiled faintly, sipping the chamomile tea I'd made. Exactly. I'm not asking to hurt them. I'm just making sure they don't benefit from hurting us. A long silence stretched between us, warm and full of unspoken truth. Outside, the snow continued to fall, pure and quiet, as if the world itself had agreed to keep our secret just a little longer. The next morning, the sun broke through the snowy clouds, casting a soft golden hue over the front yard. Inside the house, everything looked still, too still. But underneath the silence, something was building. Momentum. A story was forming, and the walls of the Price legacy were beginning to shake. Around 10, there was a knock at the front door. I exchanged a glance with Calvin, who raised a brow as if to say, "It begins." I opened the door to a small, round woman in her 70s holding a steaming casserole dish with mismatched oven mitts. "You must be Rachel," she said with a kind smile. "I'm Marnie Keene from next door. My husband Harold and I were worried when we didn't see anyone here for Christmas dinner. Thought I'd drop off something warm." I stepped aside, ushering her in. "That's incredibly kind. Thank you. Calvin will be so touched." "Oh, I know he will," Marnie said, bustling in like she belonged there. "That man's been through more than his share. Shameful, the way he's been treated. But at least he's got you now." She settled the casserole on the counter like it was sacred. "And about time too. Landon and Vivian left him here like he was a broken appliance. Didn't even tell us. We found out from Claire, poor thing." I blinked. Wait, they didn't tell anyone they were leaving? Not a soul. They just packed up and left Tuesday morning. Saw the Uber. Big suitcases. Didn't even say goodbye. We thought maybe something had happened. I walked over the next day and found Calvin alone. House cold, fridge empty. That's when Harold started checking on him. I was stunned. They'd isolated him even from the neighbors. Marnie continued, "Anyway, I won't stay long. Just wanted to say you're not alone. A lot of folks around here care about him, even if his own son doesn't." After she left, I grabbed my journal and began writing. December 26th. First neighbor witness. Name: Marnie Keene. Observation: Calvin left alone. Unannounced departure by family. Offered unsolicited account of neglect. Casserole included. Strong start. Calvin said from the armchair, sipping tea. Marnie talks a lot, but people listen when she does. He wasn't wrong. By noon, 2 more neighbors stopped by. One brought soup. Another came with an old copy of the Wall Street Journal, saying Calvin might want something to read. Both commented, without prompting, on Landon and Vivian's disappearance. "We thought they'd be back by now," said Mr. Godfrey, the elderly man from across the street. "Calvin helped me with my taxes last year, even when his hands were already giving him trouble. You'd think someone in his family would return the favor." I offered polite nods and noted every word after they left. Calvin and I started calling them unintentional character witnesses, and they kept coming. By the end of the second day, we had 6 accounts, 3 handwritten notes offering help, and a voicemail from one neighbor expressing concern that the house looked dark for days. Eva, Calvin's lawyer, called in the evening after reviewing the log entries I'd scanned and emailed. "This is gold," she said. "If we can supplement it with time-stamped photos and a signed statement from you, Rachel, this will make contesting the will borderline suicidal for Landon." I hesitated. What if they accuse me of manipulating him? Because I'm named in the will. Eva's voice dropped lower, firmer. "I've had him assessed twice by independent physicians. His mental competency is documented. And Rachel, he didn't choose you because he was weak. He chose you because he's finally strong enough to see who's worthy." I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the emotion in my throat. "Thank you." That night, I sat beside Calvin again as he flipped through a photo album. He stopped on a picture of a younger Landon, high school age, leaning against a cherry-red convertible with a smirk that hadn't changed in 20 years. "That was the car I bought him for graduation," Calvin said. "His mother said I was trying to control him with money. I just thought he'd earned something good." I studied the photo, then looked at the man beside me, thin, weathered, but somehow more alive than I'd ever seen him. "Do you regret it?" I asked softly. "Regret the car?" He shook his head. "No. I regret thinking that love could buy decency." Silence fell between us again, deeper this time. Outside, the snow was piling higher, and the town lights glowed softly through the frosted windows. Inside, though, the warmth wasn't from the heater or the tea or the casserole dishes crowding the kitchen. It came from something else. A shared sense of justice. And the quiet but certain knowledge that we weren't just preparing for their return. We were preparing to bury the illusion of who they were, once and for all. By Friday, Calvin's color had changed. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. Just a duller hue around his lips, a slower rise and fall of his chest, a heaviness in his hands when he reached for his tea. But I saw it. His strength was ebbing. He didn't say anything until the early afternoon. We were sitting in the sunroom, an enclosed porch with fogged windows and old wicker furniture, when he suddenly looked at me and said, "It's coming faster now." I lowered my book. "What is?" "The end." The words landed like a quiet explosion in my chest. Not surprising, not unexpected, but still devastating. "I thought we had more time," I whispered. "So did I," he replied. "But that's the thing about dying, it doesn't care about your to-do list." His attempt at humor made me smile, but only faintly. He turned his face toward the window, watching the snow begin again. "We need to finish everything this weekend. By the time they get back on Monday, I want it all locked in place." And so we began the final phase. That evening, Eva returned to the house, bringing with her a notary named Sylvia and a folder full of legal documents. Calvin insisted on dressing himself for the occasion. He wore a pressed button-down shirt and a wool cardigan, his frame thinner than ever beneath the fabric. "I may be dying," he said, "but I will not sign my life away in pajamas." We gathered in the study, where the light was warm and the air smelled of old cedar and peppermint tea. I sat beside Calvin as Eva guided him through each page: asset transfers, final amendments to the will, trust documents, medical power of attorney, and an official statement explaining the reasons for disinheriting Landon and Vivian. Sylvia notarized every page, silent but efficient. When it was time for the video statement, Calvin cleared his throat and asked for 5 minutes alone. I stepped outside, standing in the hall as he recorded his final message, one that would be played for his family if they dared challenge the will. I only heard the end. "She gave me more kindness in 1 week than my family gave me in a decade. I choose to honor that." His voice broke slightly. And then, click. When I returned, Eva stood near the bookshelf. eyes glistening, and Sylvia was packing up in silence. "He's ready," Eva said softly. But he didn't look ready. He looked hollowed out. Spent. Like a man who had used the last of his willpower not to stay alive, but to finish something important. "Take care of her," Calvin said to Eva, nodding toward me. "She's going to need help navigating what comes next." Eva smiled gently. "She's stronger than she knows." After they left, the house fell into a heavy hush. I sat beside Calvin in the living room, both of us too exhausted to speak. The Christmas tree still sat unlit in the corner, its decorations half done, just as I'd found it when I arrived. "I never liked Christmas," he murmured suddenly. "Why?" "Too many expectations. Too many ways to disappoint people." He paused. "But I liked watching you cook. That part felt real." We stayed there until he nodded off, head gently leaning to one side. I covered him with a soft quilt and sat in silence, the only sound the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. At dawn, I woke to find him already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a pen and an envelope. "What are you doing up?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. He held up the envelope. "Final letter. For Landon." I poured coffee and sat down across from him. "Want me to help?" He shook his head. "This one has to come from me alone." An hour later, he handed it to me without ceremony. "Don't read it yet. Wait until after they see the video." I nodded, heart heavy. That afternoon, Calvin asked to be moved to the sunroom. "It's the only place in this house that still feels like mine," he said. I wheeled his chair into the room, opened the windows slightly to let in fresh air, and played soft classical music from the little speaker on the side table. He fell asleep quickly, but even in rest, there was tension in his face, as if part of him was still holding on not to life, but to purpose. Around 4 p.m., he stirred. I brought him water, adjusted his blanket. "Rachel," he said weakly, "I'm here. You know what I regret most?" I leaned closer. "What?" "Not fighting sooner." I squeezed his hand gently. "You're fighting now." His eyes, those steel-gray eyes, met mine with one last flicker of light. "Then let them feel it." He fell asleep again. This time, for the last time. Monday morning arrived in a hush of wind and snow. I woke early, showered, and dressed in the black wool dress Calvin had insisted I buy. "Subtle but serious," he'd said. "They need to see you as the executor, not the ex-wife." The house was clean, calm, and staged with deliberate precision. Calvin's will and legal documents were stacked neatly on the dining table. His video testimony was queued up on the living room TV. Folders filled with dated logs, screenshots, witness accounts, and photographs were laid out in order, like a trial exhibit. At 11:47 a.m., a car door slammed, then another. Their laughter hit me first, shrill and oblivious, echoing across the driveway like they were returning from a picnic. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to watch them. Landon was in aviators and a windbreaker, rolling a suitcase behind him. Vivian wore a tropical wrap dress over winter boots and clutched 2 duty-free shopping bags. Claire followed, her smile already fading as she spotted my car. And Yara was there too, hanging back near the Uber, tapping her phone like none of this concerned her. When they entered the house, Landon's voice rang out. "Rachel? Babe? You're still here? Is Dad awake?" I stepped forward, calm and composed. "Victor passed away Saturday night." All 3 stopped mid-step. The air went still. "What?" Vivian snapped, clutching her purse tighter. "He died peacefully," I said. "Around midnight. I was with him." Claire's face crumpled. "Oh my God, no one called me?" "I left messages," I said, voice even. "Several." No one responded. Landon's jaw flexed. "You had a funeral?" "Without us. His neighbors were here. Eva, his attorney. People who actually showed up." Vivian's tone turned brittle. "Don't get self-righteous. You're not family." I held up a cream-colored envelope. Victor left this. For all of you. He asked that I read it when you returned. They filed into the living room like strangers entering a courtroom. No one sat in his rocking chair. I unfolded the letter and began. It wasn't angry. It was precise, clear, devastating in its restraint. Victor described the quiet abandonment, the lies, the calculated neglect. He mentioned the Christmas Eve they missed, the missed refills of pain medication, the voices he overheard calling him a burden. Vivian's face flushed. Landon crossed his arms, but said nothing. Claire just wept quietly. And then I pressed play. Victor appeared on screen, seated in the sunroom, frail but sharp-eyed. To those who see this, he began. Know that I speak not from bitterness, but from truth. For 15 minutes, he laid it bare, every lie, every financial siphoning, every whispered comment when they thought he couldn't hear. The room was silent except for Victor's voice and the soft ticking of the mantel clock. When it ended, Landon stood abruptly. This is manipulation. He wasn't in his right mind. Actually, I said. Handing Eva's assessment to Vivian, he was declared competent by 2 doctors. Signed. Stamped. Vivian grabbed the document, scanning it with trembling hands. I want to see the will. Landon said. It's on the dining table, I replied. Along with full documentation of medical neglect, financial exploitation, and 6 signed witness statements. You're welcome to review everything. They stormed into the next room. Claire stayed behind. I had no idea, she said softly. I really didn't know it was that bad. You were the only one who responded, I said. He appreciated that. Truly. She nodded tearfully and followed them. 10 minutes later, Eva arrived, coat dusted with snow, briefcase in hand. Perfect timing, I said, opening the door. Landon's voice boomed from the dining room. This is a fraud. Eva raised a brow. Then let's clear it up. She joined them, laying out the facts with icy precision. The house was never in their name. The assets had already been transferred to an irrevocable trust. All of it was legal, witnessed, and documented. Rachel was the trustee. And Victor's final wishes would be honored in full. Vivian was livid. You little gold digger. You manipulated him into this. I didn't respond. I simply handed her the photos. Landon and Yara toasting champagne. The Caribbean beaches. The timestamp showing it all. You left him to die, I said quietly. And now you're mad because he saw you clearly before the end. Landon tried again. Rachel, look, this doesn't have to be a war. We can work something out. You and me, we go way back. I smiled coldly. You left me here with a dying man and a grocery list. You emptied our savings. Took my future and spent it on a tan. I pulled off my wedding ring and dropped it into his palm. Now you get nothing. Not the money. Not the house. Not me. Behind me. Eva was already calling the estate's financial advisor to initiate the next steps. Claire touched my arm on her way out. Thank you for being there when we weren't. I nodded. Outside, snow began to fall again. And inside, justice settled in the corners like warmth returning to a long-abandoned home. Epilogue prompt. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. My favorite moment was when Victor said, "Don't just survive them. Outgrow them." That one line carried so much weight. Which moment touched your heart the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Speech balloon backhand index pointing down.